Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. He whispered, "I love you," the way he always did before drifting off to sleep low, warm, almost protective. His hand rested against my hip, his breath steady and calm. I closed my eyes, letting myself believe it, letting myself imagine that nothing between us had ever been fragile, that the last 4 years of our marriage were built on something unshakable. But the truth? I had already started to suspect Dot wasn't one big thing, more like dozens of small, almost invisible cracks. The extra late nights at work, the way he kept his phone face down, even at dinner, the way he no longer lingered in the kitchen with me on Sunday mornings, pretending to help make breakfast just so he could kiss my neck. Those moments had evaporated slowly, replaced by quick nods and half smiles. That night, as he slept, I couldn't stop staring at his phone on the nightstand. Dot. It was ridiculous. I told myself, people who trust each other don't snoop, but people who trust each other don't hide their phones either. Dot. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might wake him. I slid the phone toward me, my breath catching when it lit up at the touch of my finger. His passcode. I didn't know it. Or at least, I thought I didn't until I tried our wedding anniversary and the screen unlocked. Out at first. There was nothing. A few work texts, group chats with friends. But then I saw a thread at the bottom of the list, marked only with a first. Name I didn't recognize - Elena. My stomach tightened as I opened it. The first message wasn't even subtle. "I can still feel you from last night." And there he was, replying with a laughing emoji and, "Don't tempt me while I'm in bed with her." That word landed like a punch. He meant me. I scrolled, my fingers trembling, my eyes skimming words. I didn't want to read, but couldn't stop from seeing photos, private ones, voice notes where he called her baby. Plans they'd made for next weekend, the same weekend he told me he'd be out of town for work. The man lying peacefully next to me, the same man who just whispered that he loved me, was in love with someone else. Or maybe just a must. I didn't know which would hurt more. I put the phone back exactly where it was and lay there in the dark, feeling the warmth of his body only inches away, but knowing it was no longer mine. The next morning, I played along. "I need coffee." I kissed him goodbye. I watched him leave, smiling like nothing had changed, because for him, maybe nothing had, but for me, everything had. All day, I replayed the messages in my head, each one slicing deeper than the last. I thought about confronting him that night, screaming, throwing his phone, demanding answers. But instead, I did something quieter. I started looking at him differently, watching the way he laughed at his phone when he thought I wasn't looking, the way he dressed a little sharper on work trips, the way he always checked his reflection twice before leaving. Every lie he'd ever told started to line up in my mind, forming a picture so clear it was almost insulting. That weekend, when he said he had to leave early for his trip, I told him I'd miss him. I even hugged him tighter than usual, just so I could memorize the feeling before I stopped craving it. And when the door closed behind him, I sat in the silence and finally let myself cry, not because I'd lost him, but because I realized I'd been holding on to a version of him that didn't exist anymore. The first few days after I found those messages, I moved through my life like I was underwater. Everything felt muffled, distant. He'd call me from his work trip in that same easy voice, telling me how much he missed me, and I'd bite back every word I wanted to scream. My responses were short, careful, so I wouldn't crack. The strangest thing was how normal he sounded, how convincingly he could love me and betray me in the same breath. By the third night, I'd stopped sleeping properly. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those messages again. I kept wondering if she knew about me. Did she know he had a wife? Or was she just as blind as I'd been? When he came home, it was almost unbearable to watch him. He brought flowers, kissed me at the door, told me the trip had been exhausting. I had to clench my fists to keep from asking exhausting for what meetings or her bed. Instead, I smiled, accepted the flowers, and excused myself to the kitchen. My hands shook as I put them in water. Over the next week, I began my own quiet investigation. I checked his email when he forgot to log out. I memorized the numbers he dialed most often. I even drove past his office one afternoon when he said he'd be working late. His car wasn't there. It wasn't until a rainy Thursday that I finally got the proof I didn't know I was looking for. He came home earlier than expected. His shirt slightly wrinkled, his hair damp from the rain. I was sitting on the couch when his phone buzzed. He was in the shower by then, so I picked it up. One message. From Alina. Hope you got home safe. Can't stop thinking about this afternoon. Double quotes, afternoon. Not a trip, not a work event. That day, the same day he'd come home smiling and kissed me in the hallway. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. Then I placed it back on the table before he returned. When he stepped out of the bathroom, steam following him, he looked at me with that same warm expression he'd always worn, like nothing was wrong. He sat beside me, draped an arm around my shoulders, and asked about my day. I answered, calm, even, because the truth was, I wasn't ready to confront him yet. I wanted him to think I was still in the dark. The next few weeks became a performance. I laughed at his jokes. I kissed him goodnight. I listened when he talked about work, nodded when he told me about deadlines, and never let him see how much I knew. In private, though, I planned. I deleted the vacation alerts from my email before he could see them because I was booking a trip of my own. Not with him, not alone, with someone I could trust. My sister lived by the coast in a small town where the air smelled like salt and the nights were quiet enough to hear the waves from bed. I told her everything, and she didn't try to convince me to stay. You need to get out before you forget who you are, she said. The night before I left, I stood in our bedroom doorway watching him sleep. His face looked peaceful, like the man I had once fallen in love with, but I knew now it was a mask. A version of him that only existed in moments like this, when he was unconscious, when he wasn't lying. I didn't wake him. I didn't leave a note. I just took my bag and left at my sister's. I found myself breathing easier for the first time in months. I walked along the shoreline, let the wind pull my hair across my face, let the ocean's roar drown out every memory of him whispering those 3 words. But late at night, in the quiet, the memories still came. And I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I wasn't just hurt. I was angry. Angry that he'd taken my trust like it was nothing. Angry that he'd made me doubt myself. Angry that he'd said, I love you, while loving someone else, or maybe no one at all. I didn't know yet if I would go back for a confrontation, or just send the divorce papers without a word. What I did know was that, for the first time in a long time, my heart was starting to feel like mine again. It was 2 weeks before I saw him again. By then, I'd grown used to the rhythm of the ocean. Outside my sister's window, I'd filled my days with long walks and late-night conversations with her over mugs of tea. But there was a restlessness under my skin, a part of me that couldn't settle, not without closure. I didn't just want him to know I knew. I wanted him to see it in my eyes. One evening, I packed a small bag and told my sister I was going back, just for a night. She didn't try to stop me. When I pulled into our driveway, his car was there. The lights inside were dim, but I could see him in the kitchen through the window, pouring himself a drink. For a moment, I just sat in my car, my fingers tight around the steering wheel. Then I walked up to the door. He looked surprised when he opened it, but only for a second. You're back, he said, his voice careful. I've been trying to call. I stepped inside without answering. My eyes scanned the house, noting the small changes, an empty wine glass on the counter, his jacket tossed over a chair. Where's Alina tonight? I asked. He froze. What? I met his gaze and held it. You heard me. He set the glass down slowly. I don't know what you think. I don't think, I said, cutting him off. I know the messages. The afternoons you weren't at work. The lies you've been telling me every single day while still saying, I love you before falling asleep beside me. His mouth opened, closed. I saw a flicker of guilt before he masked it with something else, calmness. Maybe even pity. It wasn't what you think, he said softly. I let out a bitter laugh. Do you have any idea how ridiculous that sounds? I've read her words, Liam. I've seen yours. You can't talk your way out of this. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The only sound was the faint hum of the fridge. Finally, he said, I didn't mean for it to happen. That's supposed to make me feel better. No, but it's the truth. I could feel my chest tightening, my nails digging into my palms. The truth, I repeated, is that you chose her. Every time you texted her, met her, lied to me, you chose her. He stepped closer, and I regret it every single day. I wanted to step back. I wanted to push him away. But there was a part of me that still remembered the way it used to be, the way his touch could make the world fall away. That part of me hated itself for remembering. You don't get to regret something and keep doing it, I said. My voice cracked, and I hated that he could still make me feel this way. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. If you love? I whispered. You let me go. You don't chain me to a lie. Something in his face broke, then his composure slipping. I can't lose you, he said, his voice low. I don't care about her. I care about this. About us. But us wasn't the same anymore. The trust that had once held it together had shattered. And yet, in the silence that followed, in the way he looked at me raw, almost desperate, there was something real. I should have walked out right then. I know that dot instead. I found myself standing there, heart pounding, torn between the pain he caused and the pull he still had over me. And maybe it was the weeks of bottled up emotions, or maybe it was knowing this might be the last time, but when he reached for me again, I didn't step away. His hands framed my face, and for the first time in months, the kiss wasn't a performance. It was rough, unsteady, filled with all the things we hadn't said. I hated that I still wanted him. I hated that his touch could still undo me. But in that moment, under the weight of everything we'd been through, there was no past or future, just the present, burning and fragile. When it was over, I didn't promise him anything. I didn't tell him I was staying. But I also didn't walk away. Not yet, because the truth was, real love wasn't always clean. Sometimes it was messy, tangled with hurt and hope in equal measure. And for tonight, I let myself feel it. It was well past midnight when the rain began. The sound was steady, like 1,000 fingertips tapping on the roof, a reminder that the world outside didn't care about the wreckage inside. I sat on the couch, my bag still by the door. Liam hadn't moved far, just stood there, leaning against the kitchen counter like he didn't know if he should approach or keep his distance. We didn't speak for a long time. The air between us was thick, not just with anger, but with something heavier and unspoken history that neither of us could ignore. Finally, he crossed the room and sat at the far end of the couch. His voice, when it came, was quieter than I expected. You know the first night I told you I loved you? He said. We were at that little Italian place near the pier. You'd ordered lasagna and I couldn't stop staring at you because you had no idea how beautiful you looked when you were laughing. I closed my eyes. I remembered that night. The warmth of the candlelight, the smell of garlic bread, the way his hand brushed mine under the table. I said it before I meant to, he continued. And you smiled like it was the best thing you'd ever heard. That's the look I've been chasing ever since. I opened my eyes and looked at him, really looked. His hair was messier than usual, his shirt slightly wrinkled, like he hadn't been sleeping well. His eyes, they were tired, but there was something in them I hadn't seen in weeks, a kind of vulnerability that made my chest ache. You don't get to talk about that night, I said quietly. Not when you've spent months letting someone else make you smile. His jaw tightened. I never loved her. That's not the point, I snapped. You don't have to love someone to betray me. You just have to want them more than... You wanted to be honest with me. He didn't argue. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like he was searching for answers there. I hate myself for what I did, he said finally. But if there's even the smallest chance you can forgive me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving I deserve it. The rest of his life. The words were heavy, too heavy. I stood, walking past him toward the hallway, my steps slow. I didn't know where I was going, bedroom, bathroom, anywhere that wasn't here. But when I reached the doorway, I stopped. Maybe it was the rain or the way my own body betrayed me by remembering the good moments along with the bad. But I turned back to him, and then I saw it, the same Liam from years ago. Not the man who had lied, not the one who had been careless with my heart, but the one who had once loved me so completely it showed in every glance, every touch. "Come here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked up, confused. "Come here." I repeated. He rose slowly, like he was afraid I'd change my mind. When he reached me, we stood there for a long moment, inches apart, the storm outside filling the silence between us. I reached up, brushing my fingers along his jaw. He closed his eyes at the contact, his breath shaky, and then, as if something inside both of us broke loose at the same time, we closed the distance. The kiss wasn't gentle. It wasn't the careful kind you give when you're trying to patch things up. It was fierce, almost desperate, like we were both clinging to the last thread between us. My hands tangled in his hair. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me close, until I could feel the pounding of his heart against mine. The scent of his cologne, familiar and dangerous, filled my senses. Every inch of me screamed that this was wrong, that I shouldn't let him this close again. And yet, every inch of me also knew I'd never stopped wanting him. When we finally pulled back, our foreheads rested together. He whispered, "I love you." "I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry. I didn't answer. Not yet." The words would mean nothing until his actions proved them true. But in that moment, with the rain outside and his breath warm against my skin, I let myself believe, if only for tonight, that maybe love could survive even this. We spent the rest of the night talking in hushed tones, tangled in blankets, sharing pieces of ourselves we'd hidden for months. There was no neat resolution, no sudden forgiveness. Just two people trying to find their way back to something they weren't ready to give up on. When dawn came, I still didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for now, I stayed. The rain had grown heavier, drumming against the windows in a steady rhythm. The city beyond felt like another world, blurred and unreachable. Inside, the air was thick with everything we hadn't said, everything we'd tried to bury. Liam's hand hovered in the air between us, as if he wasn't sure I'd let him touch me. I didn't move away when his fingertips finally brushed my cheek. It was the lightest touch, but it felt like a match struck in the dark. "You have no idea," he murmured, voice low, "how much I've missed this." "Missed you," my heart thudded painfully. "You don't get to miss me after what you've done." "I know," he admitted. His hand slid to the back of my neck, his thumb tracing slow, deliberate circles against my skin. "But I can't." "Stop." I hated that my body responded before my mind could catch up, that my breath caught when he leaned closer, that my lips parted when his hovered just a breath away. "Liam," I whispered, but it wasn't a warning. The kiss began slow, almost tentative, like he was testing if I'd let him in. But the second I kissed him back, something in both of us broke open. His arms locked around me, pulling me against him with a hunger I'd nearly forgotten. I could feel the heat radiating from him, the rise and fall of his chest, the faint tremor in his hands as they slid down my back. My own fingers threaded into his hair, tugging just enough to draw a groan from him, a sound that made my knees weak. The couch, the hallway, the bedroom, it all blurred together in a haze of mouths and hands, and whispered apologies that dissolved into soft moans. The storm outside became the soundtrack, its steady roar a shield from the rest of the world. In the bedroom, he paused only long enough to search my face, his forehead pressed to mine. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice raw. "If you want me to stop, I will." I didn't answer with words. My hands gripped his shirt, pulling it over his head, revealing the familiar lines of the body I knew better than my own. The touch between us wasn't rushed. It was unhurried but consuming, like we both wanted to memorize each other all over again. His lips traced the curve of my jaw, the hollow of my throat, the line of my collarbone, each kiss a quiet plea for forgiveness. Every place his mouth touched felt like it burned, but in a way that made me crave more. My own hands explored him, with equal intensity mapping his back, his shoulders. The way his skin was warm and alive beneath my palms. When we finally came together, it wasn't the frantic desperation I thought it would be. It was deep, slow, and deliberate, like we were rediscovering what it meant to truly belong to one another. Every movement carried weight. Every sigh felt like an unspoken, "I love you," in a language only we understood. He whispered my name, like it was the only prayer he knew, his lips brushing my ear between breaths. I clung to him, my fingers digging into his skin, as though holding him tighter might keep the rest of the world from intruding. When it was over, we didn't untangle. His arms stayed locked around me, our legs intertwined beneath the sheets. His lips pressed into my hair. I could feel his heartbeat still quick, but steadying as if it had found its rhythm again. "I don't deserve you," he murmured. "You're right," I said softly. "But for tonight, I'm yours." He kissed my temple, his mouth lingering there like he didn't want to let go. Outside, the rain began to ease, but inside, the storm between us had shifted, no longer destructive, but something that might lead to a new beginning. We stayed awake until the first pale light of dawn crept into the room, whispering things we should have said months ago, tracing each other's faces like we were afraid they might fade. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was the closest thing to hope we'd had in a long time.